professor, and she was having an affair with this professor. And then the professor dragged her into a museum after she had died and like adorned her body with a bunch of jewelry from the museum. And she found out that there was like a small iota of truth in that story. There was a murder. I won't go into it here, but this kind of sparked her on an investigative piece about Harvard and about murders that have taken place at Harvard, murders and scandals, and kind of how Harvard tries to cover those up. Not only with murders, but also with like allegations of sexual abuse and things like that. But I came across the Sinedu and Trang murder-suicide and decided to cover it because I found that article, A Diary of a Murder, by Thurman. I believe her name was Thurman, or is Thurman. Yeah, Thurman's article, A Diary of a Murder, and she actually wrote a book called Halfway Heaven, I believe specifically about this case that I covered. And I know it's been a couple of days since I uploaded that video on YouTube, so I'll link it below, but I'm sure you've seen it. So I want to read and kind of discuss the aftermath of the murder-suicide with you here. And I promise that not every video I do on Patreon will be reading from an article, but I just happened to find these two extremely well-written articles over the past week or so, and I really enjoy reading them, and I'd like to share them with you guys. So I'm going to do that now. If you hate this, let me know. And I'm being serious because you guys are paying for this content, which I am immensely appreciative for. Like, I bow down to you. Because I know it's kind of a big ask. So I want to know like what you guys want, and I know a lot of you are here for the true crime content, and then I know some of you prefer other whispered content, and I don't know, I don't want you to think that I'm like cheating you out of true crime cases, because I will do those as well. I just think that these articles are interesting. I think you might find them interesting too, since you like true crime. Okay, I'm going to stop rambling now, and let's get into the rest of this article. So, this is like close to the end of the article, and it starts out, could anything have been done to prevent the tragedy? That is a question that's often been asked in the aftermath. The discussion is one in which Harvard is reluctant to participate. Everything about Harvard depends on its reputation, and it is orchestrated with great care. The tragedy was the climax of a bad year for the Public Relations Office. Two recent graduates pleading guilty to stealing $127,000 from a Harvard-based cancer charity. President Neil Rudenstein's taking leave for exhaustion. Gina Grant, the high school senior whose acceptance was rescinded when the university learned she had killed her mother. Damn. Doubtless on legal advice, the university, which has 11 in-house lawyers, adopted a policy of spin control, which meant that many people were extremely reluctant to talk to me. I found myself seeing another side of a place I thought I knew so well. In parentheses, I came from a Harvard family. My parents, my brother, were educated there. My father is a member of the faculty, and my mother has been as well. I graduated from Dunster House in 1987 and returned to teach in the English department in 1993. I had first-hand experience with some of the doctors at the University Health Services and knew other people at Harvard whom I wanted to interview, all of which led to feelings of distressed loyalty. Several tutors told me that the master of Dunster House, Carol Liam, had cautioned them not to speak to the press, and one of them called me in tears and asked to take back her interview, lest she be fired. In a case of this complexity, we prefer to centralize information. The undergraduate dean, Fred Jewett, explained to me, "Everyone's looking for a villain, and we don't want to be it." Dean Harry Lewis's letter to Harvard parents about the deaths assured them that neither student was living outside the college carefully woven advising system. Indeed, both students were in close contact with their academic advisor and seemed to be managing the ups and downs of college life. We feel confident that we are organized in a way to provide the necessary support. Just a little aside from me here. It doesn't seem like Sinedu got the necessary support, and it doesn't seem like Trang got the necessary support. Because if they had, I don't think they would be in this situation. Like the biggest, well, not the biggest, but something that kind of haunts me is that Trang really asked to be transferred out of that room because she was living in a hostile environment, and I wish that someone had kind of investigated that more. Also, an aside, I've gotten a couple comments on my YouTube channel regarding this case, kind of questioning my sympathies, like thinking that I'm being too sympathetic to Sinedu, and I just wanted to address that really quickly to you guys. I do feel for her. I think that she had underlying pathological mental health issues. Some of her diary entries seemed pretty sociopathic to me, lacking empathy. She went through a lot in her childhood. She didn't get the support she needed as a student coming from a completely different culture, like a totally different world. So I do feel for her on those counts, and I think intervention would have prevented this, and I think the right support would have prevented this. But it does not excuse murder. It does not excuse a horrific act of violence like what she perpetrated against Trang. is clear now that what she needed was clinical intervention. Mental health services at Harvard, however, are limited. Students often complain that an appointment is hard to get, and long-term, open-ended therapy is unavailable. Students who need such therapy are referred outside, at which point, intimidated by cost and lack of transportation, many give up. Dr. Elizabeth Alp Reed, the former director of consultation and liaison, acknowledges that mental health services generally have been under increasing financial pressure because they're very expensive and results are hard to quantify. One friend who knew that Sinedu had been seeing Dr. Powell since freshman year said that Powell had been trying to reach her to cancel an appointment for the Monday after she died. It is hard to imagine how he could have failed to perceive her distress. When I asked Dr. Caitlin why her therapy had been so ineffective, he offered several explanations. In part, he says, Dr. Powell didn't know Sinedu very well because he saw her only on the limited basis that the system encourages. Also, the mental health services are accustomed to dealing with ordinary neurotic problems of adjustment rather than psychotic breakdowns. Sinedu was being seen because she wanted help learning how to relate to people to be a better student at Harvard. In Ethiopia, two common explanations were offered for Sinedu's fate, and these really highlight the differences in culture and the different kind of world that Sinedu grew up in. One is the whispered accusation that she was a lesbian and therefore did the right thing to kill herself. And the object of her shame, the evils of uncontrolled female sexuality, are felt deeply in Ethiopian society. Some 90% of Ethiopian women are subjected to genital mutilation as children, and as a result of recent educational campaigns, often have the additional trauma of learning as adults that their bodies have been disfigured, and that cosmopolitan and especially Western men may reject them. So I do want to say that this article was written quite a few years ago, so that percentage might be different now. And it probably is different now because there have been a lot of educational campaigns and human rights campaigns and things along those lines. Sinedu's diaries, however, provide no direct mention of sexuality. I will die of loneliness if I don't have a husband and children, and I would break down in guilt and anguish if I do, she writes elliptically. She also alludes to an unspecified childhood trauma. The other explanation prevalent in Ethiopia is that Sinedu was possessed by spirits. Unlike lesbianism, for which one is held responsible, possession by spirits is regarded as a kind of casualty of living in the States. Because in Ethiopia, it is perfectly curable. One of Sinedu's Ethiopian relatives explained to me that if Sinedu had stayed in Ethiopia, nothing like this would have ever happened, for as soon as she started feeling bad, the family would have brought her to the holy waters. In America, you have psychologists, she said, but they don't have any special powers, do they? People are cured of spirit possession every week in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, to which Sinedu's family belongs. The religion dates to the 4th century, and in its practice of Christianity, the devil plays a central role. The devil came between us, the Amara say, when they've quarreled. In one form of spirit possession, the victim's souls are gradually replaced with spirits of a foreign, evil nature, which leads the victims to do things more and more unlike themselves, until they're finally delivered through suicide into the hands of the devil. Symptoms that perfectly fit the case of Sinedu, a good girl from a good family. Although suicide is extremely rare in Ethiopia, suicide rates are high among Ethiopians who emigrate to other countries. always want to leave, but when you pluck the thread of their selfhood, it loses all meaning. She makes a pulling gesture with her fingers and then opens her hands to show me there is nothing there. That's really interesting. Sinedu is buried in the graveyard behind St. Michael's Church in the outskirts of Addis Ababa, on a steeply sloping hillside where sheep and goats graze. 2,000 people attended her funeral for, as one of her teachers explained, her death was a tragedy for the whole culture. Funerals are often a devastating expense in the life of an Ethiopian family. After the burial, as is traditional, all the guests were fed nepro, which is chickpeas and wheat, and coffee, and friends and relatives stayed with the family for weeks afterward, sleeping in a tent in the courtyard. And after 2.5 months, when the marble headstone was ready, another ceremony was held. Church burials are not permitted for suicides because when the devil tempted the soul to suicide, he obtained it forever. But Sinedu's family, who believed that no one knew what had really happened to her, arranged to have given her such a burial. By the time I visited Addis Ababa, Sinedu had been buried for more than a month. I had trouble finding the Tadesse's, I'm not sure if that's how you say it, Tadesse's house, for most of the street signs in Addis Ababa were taken down during the terror regime, because no one wanted to be found. Wow, that's really interesting. And the sense of secrecy has endured. It turned out to be a modest stone house with a central courtyard and surrounded, like many middle-class Ethiopian houses, by a high tin fence to keep out intruders. I stood outside, staring at the wall in the rain for a long time before I rang the bell. In a small living room with yellow stone walls, Sinedu's parents, her 2 sisters, and one of her brothers were gathered. Sinedu's father was recovering from a heart attack he'd suffered after his daughter's death. He looked weary and sick. He was retired now. Sinedu, as a doctor, would have supported the family. Cookies and orange Fanta were served with a pained hospitality. Sinedu's mother, in black mourning robes, wept silently throughout my visit. I tried to ask neutral questions about Sinedu, but they seemed puzzled by them. Children have their wishes, and it was Sinedu's wish to be a doctor, her father said. We supported her in that wish. Was she happy at Harvard? She never complained. She told them her roommate was a very friendly, cooperative girl. Then Sinedu's father said in a heavy, final voice, I don't care whether 100 psychologists or 1,000 police detectives tell me. I know my daughter did not commit these crimes. The stories we read, we do not believe. Something no one yet knows must have happened. One day, the truth will come to light. Who would know her if not her parents, her mother and I? We've been with her all her life. We ate from the same table. He stumbled, his voice breaking, unable to explain the chord of connection they felt, from which it was incomprehensible she could have willingly severed herself forever. In her diary, she wrote, I don't understand what people mean by the warmth of a family, the love of their mother, and the security of their home. I grew up feeling lonely and cold amidst 2 parents and 4 siblings. I spent very limited time with other families that it took me all my life to figure out what they had and what I did not have. There was a lot of emotional pain and trauma involved in my own life. My parents did not beat me or abuse me. They fed me, bought me clothes, sent me to good schools, and wished the best for me. As a result, I was unable to point at any tangible cause. Do not get me wrong. I do not blame them for what they did. They did not know how else to be. At a Vietnamese Buddhist temple in Boston, there's a picture of Trang on a large table in one corner, along with photographs of others who have died. The temple was once a Catholic church. The altar has been replaced with a statue of the Buddha, but the stained glass windows still depict the sufferings of Christ. The table is laden with plates of food that relatives bring the dead. There was a service every week for the first 49 days after Drang's death to pray that her consciousness will be accepted for salvation by the Buddha and not be reborn on earth again. At Drang's funeral, her father, Trang Ho, cried out in Vietnamese, "Don't go, don't go, and why did I work so hard for 10 years and go through so much in the end just to bury my daughter?" Having Trang go to Harvard, this beautiful place which is halfway heaven, was everything her family had wanted and worked for. A family friend explained, "Harvard will always be in my heart," her father told me. "For me, it is the best place and the worst place because it's the place where my daughter died." For the people around her, Drang's death is one of a series of losses. It is part of the double meaning that America has always had for them, the country that promised Vietnam so much, but instead entangled them in years of violence, the safe haven they have never quite reached. Drang's father thinks that Vietnamese people have a special strength because they have suffered so much. 1,000 years under the Chinese rule, then the French, and then the war. They have kept their hope, he says, and each time they are reborn stronger. Drang's mother is still in a deep depression. She has lost interest in sleeping and cooking and doing housework. She is afraid she did something wrong in another life to deserve to have a daughter die in this way. She stays home alone all day in a small walk-up apartment, praying at a candlelit shrine for Trang. Trang would have been graduating on her way to medical school in the fall, she said recently in Vietnamese, dissolving into tears. A woman who attends the family temple told me that Trang must have done something to Sinedu in another life. The Buddha is very fair. Everything is a balancing out. Did Drang's parents do something wrong in their previous life, I asked, that they deserve to have their child die in this way? No, no, she said impatiently. Life is suffering. Children die. Her parents need to accept that Trang spent all the time with them that she had to spend. Trang Ho has taken a leave of absence from Tufts University, where she was studying biopsychology. And Tao, just to remind you, was Drang's friend who saw her murdered. She lives with her mother and works full-time in a lab. She feels she has to staunch the flow of loss for her parents, but she does not know how. She has her own loss. There is no one I talk to now, she says. I have lost my best friend, my life companion, my sister. Tao Nguyen is a member of the temple too. She has had 2 operations to repair the nerves of her damaged hand. This summer, her doctor wants to do a skin graft over the gash that stretches across most of her hand. She is haunted by self-reproach that she did not try a second time to get the knife from Sinedu. I tell her what one detective told me, that Tao did an incredible job trying to save her friend and should be commended, but she is unconvinced. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. Okay. In Vietnamese culture, the spirits of the dead return in dreams, on the operating table, and then for months afterwards in Tao's dreams. Trang was angry with her. Once Tao dreamed she was climbing a mountain, carrying an unbearably heavy burden. She could see Trang ahead of her across a stream, and she called to her and hurried to catch up. But when she reached Trang and tried to give her the burden, Trang turned away from her, and she had to continue up the mountain alone. In time, though, she had a different dream about Trang, a good dream. She was standing alone in a room, and Trang came up to her from behind and put her arms around her and said, I know you're so lonely now that I'm leaving you. And Tao said, yeah, I'm so lonely. Tao had always loved Trang's hands. She had looked at them in the coffin, but gloves had been so smooth and whole again, and Tao knew that Trang loved and forgave her. Tao cannot believe that Trang had ever done anything wrong, even in another life, because she is so good. There is no one in the world who is perfect, but she is perfect, she said. In Buddhist philosophy, people sometimes die to pay for bad deeds, but sometimes they die because they have nothing more to pay for, and they're just ready to move on. The temple priest, the Reverend Mr. Tikyak told me that, although it is a secret, he knows through meditation that Trang has been reborn in the Pure Land. Tao Nguyen says she thinks this is true, but also says she is selfish because she wants Trang to be reborn. Recently, she had a dream in which Trang was away but missed her friends and exams and graduation. She wanted to know if she could return or if she had missed too much to make up. Tao reassured her that it was not too late. She could still come back. There was still a place for her here. For a long time, Tao was very angry at Sinedu. She would write in her diary that she hated her and her family and her country. And then she would be frightened that Sinedu might know and try to hurt her again. But how could she asked again and again whenever we talked. Finally, though, she had a new dream about Sinedu. Sinedu stood at the end of her bed in the darkness. Sinedu didn't say anything because they had not talked while she was alive. But she tried to look at her and touch Tao's leg in a way that made Tao understand that she was sorry now. Maybe she could not help herself, Tao told me in a soft voice. On May 25th, a Buddhist ceremony is planned at the gravesite to commemorate the anniversary of Trang's death. Trang is buried in Mount Auburn Cemetery, a beautiful 19th century cemetery where Longfellow and Mary Baker Eddy and generations of Harvard dignitaries and elite Bostonians are buried. In the ceremony, a fire is to be made in a metal bowl, and bits of clothing, money, and a small symbolic house, and letters to Trang are to be burned to send them to her spirit. Last year, hundreds of people attended Trang's funeral, watching as the saffron-robed priest clanged bells and burnt incense and chatted in Vietnamese and Sanskrit. Finally, the Reverend Dr. Tikyak, I think I'm saying that wrong, but I'm trying, looked up and translated, "Ladies and gentlemen, life is impermanent. Life is full of sorrow. Death causes sorrow. Love and separation cause sorrow. Violence causes more sorrow. We must not follow the way of violence, but practice love and compassion toward friend and foe." That is a beautiful quote, and it reminds me of a comment I received today. She said, "Life is long and more painful than I could ever imagine." But I'm going to read this part again. Practice love and compassion toward friend and foe. The family circled the coffin 3 times, escorting Trang into a new life. Male relatives carried Mrs. O too weak to walk. The casket was lowered